We are live. Hey, Sam. Thanks for joining.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for taking your time and joining this evening to discuss something on Angular. And so let me start with this group first. So this group was created like 5 years before. Not me. I mean, someone created it long back, and it kept on moving to different people. And now I'm handling this Angular RTP group, and we have close to like active 200 participants here in Angular RTP group, and we usually meet in libraries and sometimes in over online to discuss on interesting stuffs on Angular. And I'm the host, and I also speak on Angular topics in the Meetup events. So that's all the quick introduction about this group. And we also have some audience from other than our group. Since we are hosting it as online event, this this opened door to others to join this event as well. And this event, we have this Angular event happens every month. Like usually it happens on Wednesdays or on Saturdays. So just join our Meetup group just in case if you are not there already. And yeah, so let me share the agenda for today's session quickly. Let me share my screen first. Okay. Hope you are able to see my screen. Okay. So we have two talks today. We have Sam with us. Sam is going to talk about NgRx effects on Auth. And Sam is a great speaker. He spoke on Angular topics in Angular India conference that happened like 2 months back. And also he spoke on Angular related to Auth in Angular in NG conference as well. He's a Google developer expert for Angular and web technologies, and he is also Auth0 ambassador. And Sam will talk more about him later. And the next talk what we have here is on preloading strategies for Angular modules. I'm going to talk about that, and I also have a quick demo to show it, like how preloading modules works and what are the advantages of using preloading strategy over the traditional way of lazy loading the Angular modules. So this is the schedule we have. We just started with a quick welcome note. And we will go ahead and start with the NgRx effects in Auth. Like Sam will talk about that in a couple minutes. And once his talk is over, I will take the stage and I will talk about preloading strategies for Angular modules from 6:45 to 7:20. That's approximate time. And at the end, we will have the quick question and answer session, and we will say a goodbye. Okay. And this is happening in EDT time. And I also see like a couple of participants join from other places like India and other Asian countries as well. Okay. So that's it. Over to you, Sam.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
Great. Let me share my screen here. Okay. And all right.
Okay. I added it to the screen.
Can you see my screen okay? You can see it? I can't see the chat or anything, so I'm just assuming that the answer is yes. Okay, yeah, so we're going to talk.
Yep.
Oh, I think there's a lag there. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the role of effects in NgRx authentication. And so I love NgRx, and I love teaching about NgRx. I think it's just because I love trying to break down complex, abstract concepts in things like the Redux pattern, and especially trying to make it understandable for newcomers or junior developers. And one thing that I've found, I see I've got this thing for StreamYard here in my way, but I can't move the mouse in order to close it. So sorry, it's just going to be there the whole time. But one thing that I found is that for a lot of folks in the NgRx ecosystem who are teaching these things, we found that effects are sort of the hardest part of learning NgRx, or at least they're one of the hardest parts of learning NgRx. I know that was the case for me, for example. And I think that's because even though effects are really powerful and can do a lot of things, they're at the same time, they're really abstract. They're not as concrete as actions or reducers. So I think, when you're first learning Redux and NgRx, it's easier to make the connection between dispatching an action and triggering a reducer to do something. That just like clicks a lot faster. Whereas effects, they have a lot to them and they're a little bit harder to wrap your arms around. So effects can be a bit of a sticking point for developers in NgRx. At the same time, I also love Auth, which is convenient given my day job. And I've been giving a talk over the last year on demystifying token authentication in NgRx. And in fact, Udhay mentioned NG India, and that's actually the talk I gave at NG India, which was an amazing conference. Hopefully some of some folks who are on the call now were there. That was an awesome event. And one of the things I've realized in giving that talk a few times now is that effects are kind of the cornerstone of implementing authentication in an NgRx app. So on the one hand, effects are one of the most complicated and hardest parts of NgRx. On the other hand, they're pretty much the cornerstone of auth in NgRx. So it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to put those two things together, right? So for a lot of people, when they go to implement auth in an NgRx app, it causes a minor panic attack because it's just a lot of complex topics all at once that you're trying to wrap your head around. And that's totally normal. So my goal in this talk is to help get you from that sense of panic to a sigh of relief that you feel like you understand not only effects in authentication, but just in general in NgRx. We'll sort of use authentication as the starting point for understanding the broader role of effects in NgRx. So what we're going to talk about today is the role of effects in NgRx authentication. And we'll start by talking about sort of some general principles of how effects work in NgRx. Then we're going to talk about the common struggles people have with effects. And then lastly, we're going to talk about effects in the login flow and how you can overcome the struggles that everyone faces with them. So Udhay mentioned, I'm Sam Julien. I am, or Sam at Sam Julien on Twitter and Twitch. I'm a developer advocate at Auth0. We're an auth platform built by and for developers. I also am an Angular GDE and collaborator, and I love teaching probably most of all. I built the comprehensive ng upgrade course, upgrading AngularJS, and I'm an instructor for Thinkster and Egghead. I created a free Angular Basics collection recently on Egghead, so be sure to go check that out. I also put helpful code tips and write about my journey as a self-taught developer at samjulien.com, so you can go subscribe there and try to get helpful life and career stuff from me. So let's start by talking about effects in general in NgRx. And to do that, let's back up a little bit and have a quick architecture review. So in Angular, when we build out an app.
Hey, Sam, sorry for interrupting you. Yeah. You can click on that small hide button over there to hide.
Well, I can't. Hold on. I've got to exit out of the presentation and then do that. There we go.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back to it.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're back. And now we don't have any obstructions. Okay. So in Angular, when we go to build out an app, we have at the simplest level, we have services that are interacting with components. And then usually it's sort of a two-way communication between the services and the components. But then we go to NgRx, and that's not the model that we have anymore, right? Instead of going and having just services and components that are interacting directly with each other, we go to this different type of architecture where application state is updated by dispatching actions to reducers, and then the components read that state through selectors. So then we have these effects, right? So effects also listen for actions, and they handle side effects. And that's not all that they can do. So let's zoom in on that and try to get a better feel for what effects do. So effects can decide when to call services, and they can communicate with APIs. But they also can handle your control flow logic. And these first two, I think, are where people start to get effects. They start to associate effects with services and APIs. Oh, I have an API call that I need to make. I'm going to need an effect to handle that. But I think this last thing of handling the control flow logic is where people start to lose that connection. So let's talk about what this means. What does handle control flow logic mean? That's sort of a jargony phrase, right? Well, it means that effects function as a task runner. Another way to think about this is that effects are the brain of NgRx. Mike Ryan and Brandon Roberts like to say that effects are the meat of the NgRx lasagna. I like to say that effects are the DJ of the NgRx dance floor. They make sure everyone is having a good time and the music plays in the right order, and just generally kind of run the show. Of course, working with effects is not always a bowl of cherries. There are some ways that people tend to struggle with them. And so let's cover some of those. So people tend to struggle with three major things when it comes to effects. First, they tend to struggle with actions that only trigger effects. What do I mean by that? That's actions that don't touch the reducer to modify state. So we talked in the very beginning of this talk about how it's sort of easy to make a connection between dispatching an action and triggering the reducer to change state. And so this is sort of the inverse of that. This is actions that only trigger effects and don't actually touch the state at all. The other thing that people struggle with, the second one, is non-dispatching effects. This is sort of the opposite of what I just said. It's sort of the reverse, not the inverse, but the reverse, which is effects that don't return an action, that just sort of like the flow stops with the effect. This is another thing that tend to trip people up, because the effect isn't really impacting anything else. And then the final thing that people tend to struggle with is when they encounter complex effects. What do I mean by complex effects? These are effects that are trying to handle multiple side effects at once. Okay, so we've got three common struggles. Let's talk about NgRx and authentication and effects in NgRx authentication. So what's interesting about this is if we look at our list of struggles here, we start to notice something. Do we have actions that only trigger effects in the authentication process in NgRx? We sure do. What about non-dispatching effects? Yep, we've got those too. And how about complex effects? Yeah, pretty much like the whole process of logging into an app involves complex effects. So you can see why people tend to get tripped up here when it comes to that. So I find that the cornerstone of this problem is that we had mentioned how effects work at the beginning as sort of the task runner, the DJ of the dance floor. And this problem really comes to light in authentication. So we're going to look at the login flow of logging into an app with NgRx and see how this takes place. Before we get into NgRx specifically, let's just take a quick look at the login process that we're going to be using. So this is sort of the standard login process these days to an Angular or NgRx app. You kick off the login process somehow, usually through like a login button, maybe when the app first loads. Then you get sent off to some sort of provider where you have to log in, and then you get sent back to the application, and the application has to handle that redirect back somehow. Usually you're working with some sort of SDK that the provider gives you, and then you're processing the success or the error that happens after that redirect. Inside of the success of that call is generally where you get things like the user and the token, and you're going to put those in the store, and then you generally send the user somewhere else. So you redirect them again after they've been redirected the first time. Usually you send them back. Not always, but sometimes you send them to some other part of the application, like a protected accounts page or a profile or something like that. This would happen especially if they're trying to access a protected route when they initiate the login process. So that's sort of the general flow here. And when we go to implement that in regular vanilla Angular, we usually throw all of it into an auth service, sort of a giant monolithic auth service that's handling all of those things for you. And of the things that the auth service does, the three kind of main things it does are it stores the token and the user in memory. It interacts with whatever auth SDK or libraries you're using to handle the token and everything like that. And then it handles all of the redirect logic, sending the user wherever they need to go. Now, of course, some of this might be coupled with guards or interceptors or things like that. But the auth service is kind of the key piece of this puzzle here. It interacts with the components and then probably also interacts with your data services. For example, I mentioned interceptors. If you're using an interceptor to attach a token to an outgoing request, then maybe this is also interacting with the auth service. And this doesn't really translate over to NgRx. When you go to implement NgRx, login into an NgRx app, you don't have that architecture, right? Instead of having this architecture where we have the auth service and the components and the data services all working together in sort of a linear process, instead in NgRx, we have our other architecture, which is the Redux pattern and actions and reducers and things like that. And instead, the auth service goes from this big, huge service to this thin layer alongside of our effects. And then the rest of those responsibilities that the auth service would normally do in vanilla Angular kind of get distributed between the effects, the selectors, and the reducers. So let's look at that login flow again, but think of it with NgRx in mind. So it's sort of a challenge. I want you to think about this login flow again, and first think about which parts of this auth flow directly modify the state of the application. I kind of accidentally gave this away earlier, but we'll look at it again. So we start the login process. We get sent over to our provider. The provider sends us back to handle the redirect, which is usually where we interact with an SDK, process the success or the error message, and then inside of the success callback from the SDK is usually where we interact with the user and the token, and then send the user on their merry way to wherever they were trying to get to in the first place. So if you look at this through the lens of NgRx, out of this entire process, only these two things are actually modifying the state of your application. It's just the user and the token. Now there may be other pieces that I'm leaving out for the sake of simplicity, but at the end of the day, the user profile and the token to access an API are kind of the most important artifacts here that you need to keep with you in the application state. So we would just keep them in our store. We'd have user profile and we'd have access token, and we just keep them there. Everything else in that entire process is a side effect. So if the only two things that we care about for state are the user and the token, that just by definition means that everything else is a side effect, which means that everything else needs effects. And that's why I said at the beginning of this talk that the effects are actually the most important part of authentication in NgRx. So if we go back and instead, let's just zoom in on this first piece of this flow and look at how we would implement that. So logging into the provider, basically. Well, we would start with actions. We always want to start with our actions. We'd have an action called login that's namespace to auth, and we start the login process. And then we would immediately want to create an effect, because the effect is just sending us to our provider. So we're going to have a login effect, and it's going to be listening for that login action. And then we're going to use the tap operator. Since this is a side effect where we're not returning a new action, we're just going to call the Auth Services login function. So let's just peek at that login function really quick on the Auth Service here. So in the Auth Service, notice that this login function is really just a pass-through for the Auth client. So with the Auth client here, that is the SDK. Whatever SDK that you're using is probably going to have some sort of client that you're going to initialize in your Auth service. And that's what I'm talking about here. And so this Auth service becomes this thin layer that's just wrapped around your Auth client. So that's the login method that we're calling here in our effect. And then we've got to add this options object for dispatch set to false, because we're not sending out a new action, right? Because the result of calling the login method is going to be that we're going to be redirected to wherever we're going to log into the application. So nothing else is going to happen here. And so we've immediately hit on two of our struggles. We've already, just in the first part of this, we've found an action that only triggers an effect and an effect that doesn't dispatch a new action. So we've already hit our first two struggles right there. And the way that we can overcome this is by remembering what I said earlier about effects functioning as a task runner. So like I said, effects are the DJ of the NgRx dance floor, but let's kind of dig deeper into what I mean by that. So for example, if you were at a party and you ask the DJ to play your favorite song, nothing happens instantaneously unless your DJ just opens their mouth and starts serenading you on the spot, right? They have to go through a series of steps to make that happen. They've got to grab the record, they've got to put it on the player, and then they have to play the song. And if we think of that in terms of tasks and effects and state, these first two items here of grabbing the record and putting it on the player, they don't really have any outcome, right? Playing the song is the state, is the actual outcome that we're looking for. And the other two things leading up to it are just effects of that. So we can use that same thought process when we think about logging into an application, right? So if we think about what has to happen when we log into an application, we have to call the auth service to log in. We then have to handle that redirect flow, right? We're going to get sent over to log in and then sent back to the application, and we got to process everything that comes along with that. And then once we've done all that, then we update the store with the token and the user profile. So everything leading up to updating the store is just a side effect. It's just a task that has to be run in order to have that desired outcome that we want, which is updating the store and having our user profile and our access token and all that good stuff. So we've kind of covered the first half of this. Let's look at the second half, where we handle the redirect, and then we work with the SDK to get the success and handle our user and token and redirect the user. There's a lot happening in this second half once you get back to the application. So the first thing we might do is we would create an action for handling the redirect, and then we would create an effect. And that effect would also listen for that handle redirect action. But what do we do here? What do we do? We have this exhaust map. You might be using concat map. The only reason I'm using exhaust map here might be to ignore network requests so that we don't have multiple network requests happening here. But what goes inside of this? This part gets a little tricky for us. So let's zoom into that. And inside of our exhaust map, we have a few different things going on here, and it's a little bit confusing. So we know we need to call the auth service's handle redirect function. This is just a function on the auth SDK that lets us get the token and the user and whatever URL we eventually need to send the user to. Usually what we do is we can when we log into the app, we can pass a parameter into our SDK that lets us remember where the user's at and then act on that later. And then after that, that's where things start to get a little confusing, right? Because we know we need to do something with the user and token and the redirect URL. We know that we need to handle any sort of errors that we find. But this middle part right here with handle what actually goes inside this gets really confusing. We need to set the user and token somewhere. We need to redirect to the redirect URL. And we assume that we need to dispatch some sort of action. But it's really unclear where we need to do these things. Do we do them in this effect? Do we do them in the reducer? What's the situation here? And so this is a perfect example of a complex effect. I've had this happen so many times where I run into a situation like this, where I start to feel like there's too much happening in an effect. And that's a good instinct. That's a code smell in NgRx. Usually what I find in that scenario is that I've missed something or I've taken something for granted. So it's sort of like this game that I like to call find the hidden side effect, where the first thing I need to do is kind of back up and try to see if there's an extra side effect that I've missed. And so when we look at the redirect process here, we're handling the redirect, we're calling the SDK to process this stuff and working out our user and token and everything. So if you think about this, calling the auth service to handle the redirect is actually already a side effect. We've sort of taken it for granted because we're not used to thinking that way, because in vanilla Angular, our service is interacting directly with the client. But in NgRx, processing the user and the token and redirecting the user has to go somewhere else. We have an additional side effect. So how do we know what to do here? How do we solve this problem? The best thing that I've found is to try to break a complex effect into smaller pieces. You really don't want an effect that's doing a whole bunch of stuff. In actuality, you want one effect to handle one side effect. When I was building this talk, and I got some feedback from Mike Ryan about it, and he said that if he ever chooses to give a talk on good effect hygiene, this would be probably the first tenet of that good effect hygiene. Let one effect handle one side effect. Don't be afraid to break up effects. So if we think about our redirect flow, just like we did with our DJ and logging in the app, it helps clarify what's a side effect and what's actually changing state. So let's break this down. We've got to call the service, the auth service, to process the redirect, basically the response from the SDK. We need to update the store with our changed state, and we need to redirect the user somewhere. So what in this process is a side effect and what is changing the state? Well, luckily in NgRx, we sort of have some keywords that can give this away for us, because we know that anything involving the store has to do with changing state. And then everything else here is a side effect. So we have a side effect before we update the store and a side effect after we update the store. So let's go back to our effect and let's refactor it. So the secret here is that this call to handle redirect on the auth service is actually already a side effect. So everything after that really needs to be broken out into a different side effect. So this stuff in here doesn't need to do all this. We can refactor this and dispatch an action with the payload from the auth SDK and the redirect URL, and then handle it elsewhere. So what I'm including in the payload here is like the user and the token, the stuff we'd actually include in the store. And then I'm sort of separating out the redirect URL. So with that in mind, we mentioned that we're updating state, right? Where do we change state? We change state in a reducer. So we'll go back to the reducer. And in the reducer, we can add a new case. We can add a new case for this handle redirect success action. And inside of that is where we can update our access token and user profile in the store. And then after that's done, we can create a new effect. And so in that new effect, we'll listen for handle redirect success. And after we get that triggered, we'll use our tap operator again, because again, this is just a side effect. We're not returning anything here. And we'll get that redirect URL off the action, and we'll navigate the user there. And of course, because we're not returning a new action, we need to add that dispatch option and set it to false. So simultaneously, when we hit this handle redirect success action, we are both modifying state in the reducer, and we are triggering this effect, which will redirect the user to a new URL. So now we've hit all three of these things. We've hit actions that only trigger effects, we've hit non-dispatching effects, and we've hit complex effects. All three of them problem solved. Now, that's a lot of information, so let's do a quick review here. So we mentioned at the beginning of the talk that effects are one of the hardest parts of learning NgRx, and it's probably because they have so many different functions, and they're also really abstract. They're not as linear and concrete as just actions that are affecting the reducer. At the same time, though, effects are like kind of the most important part of implementing authentication in your NgRx app. And so when we look at a vanilla Angular application, we tend to have this architecture where we have a big auth service that's doing a lot of things, and it's interacting with the components and the data services directly. But then we get to NgRx, and we have this like wildly different architecture, right? Instead of that, we've got actions and reducers and components and selectors, and the auth service becomes this thin wrapper for your auth SDK that just sort of like slides alongside of your effects and is just more of like a helper for the effects. We also talked about the different roles that effects play in an application. They decide when to call your services, they communicate with your APIs, and they handle your control flow logic. And those first two, that's sort of where the light bulb goes on for people with effects, but that third one gets tricky. And the key here to remember is that NgRx are sort of like the brain of the application or the DJ of the NgRx dance floor. They're the ones running the show. We also looked at the three struggles that people have with effects. We looked at actions that only trigger effects, we looked at non-dispatching effects, and we looked at complex effects, and we saw how all of them are in NgRx authentication. So we first looked at the first half of the login process and figured out that we already, right off the bat, just trying to log into the application, we have an action that only triggers an effect and a non-dispatching effect all at the same time. And the key here to help wrap your mind around this is to remember that part about effects functioning as a task runner. If it helps to just write out the process, that always helps me, just write out the steps and identify what's a side effect here and what is modifying the store. And then when we looked at the second half of the login process, once we get back to the application and have to process our response from the SDK, that's where we ran into complex effects. And complex effects are sort of a code smell. Well, not sort of. They're really a code smell in NgRx. If you start to feel like something's wrong or you're doing too much or you're unclear about what to do in this effect, that's definitely a sign that you need to break it apart. So you need to go back, slow down, find the hidden side effect that you're missing, and then break that complex effect into smaller pieces. You want your effects to only handle one side effect at a time. And so just like with the login process, we can break this down and see that out of the steps here, only updating the store is actually going to be taking place in the reducer. The other two are side effects that we'll use effects for. And so then we've knocked out all three of our struggles, and hopefully you will go from feeling a sense of dread and panic when you're working with effects in NgRx to feeling like confident and that you feel good about everything. One last thing, hopefully, if all goes as planned, we are hopefully running an NgRx conference in Huntsville, Alabama in November. Cross your fingers that all of that is still happening. And Mike made a discount code for during NgConf, and it's still good as far as I know. So you can feel free to get a 20% off your ticket with that. And then these slides, as well as various resources related to this talk, are at samj.im/ngconf-hardwired. And then, of course, you can always feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I'm always happy to answer questions. And yeah, that's all I got. Thank you so much. Let me stop sharing. Done.
Thank you so much, Sam. So that was a great talk.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it was a pleasure. And yeah, I just started with NgRx very recently. So I'm trying it in my side projects, basically. And I will apply whatever you spoke on FX part for sure. And I will reach out to you if I have any question on that on Twitter.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah. So would you recommend any articles or materials to get started with NgRx? So I know the official documentation has everything there. So do you suggest any blog post or something to quickly get started on that?
So there's a number. I'm trying to think if there's, I don't know if there's like a single source of truth for getting started with NgRx other than the docs, but there are a number of people in the community who write a lot about NgRx. There's also so people like Wes Grimes and Tim I don't know how to pronounce his name, Tim DeShriver. They write a lot of articles. Also Alex Akrushko. So all three of those guys write a lot about NgRx and really good quality articles. I've lost track of where. I know some of them write on Angular in Depth. Some of them write on Medium. But basically, if you look for any of those, I also wrote an article about authentication in NgRx, and the first part of that article kind of breaks down some of the core concepts of NgRx. So I've written a few posts on the Auth0 blog about NgRx, and then the last thing I would suggest is I believe Deborah Kurata has an NgRx course on Pluralsight. I'm pretty sure she does. Let me see. Yes, she has an NgRx Getting Started course on Pluralsight. So that's a good place to start. I'm also in the process of developing more content on NgRx, like egghead videos and things like that. I've got a couple egghead videos on just like getting started with using the NgRx schematics and things like that. So hopefully I'll be able to put up more stuff on that.
Okay, that's cool. And you got a couple of appreciations. Let me put it on the banner. So Vivek just said, thanks, Sam, that was good.
Thanks.
Yeah, and this is from Alex. Alex, thanks for joining. And
yeah, thanks for joining, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's from Salim. Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. So that was a great talk, and you shared like greater insights on NgRx FX. So that will be very useful for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So coming up, we have a talk on preloading strategies. Let me share my screen. Okay. Hope you are able to see my screen now. Okay, here it is. Hope you are able to see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining at today's event once again. We had a wonderful talk from Sam on NgRx. I think, like most of you who are from Angular background, you might have used NgRx before, and some might have not used it. So the talk from Sam should have been a great eye opener for us on NgRx and NgRx FX. So following the talk one, we have another talk for today, which is preloading strategies for Angular modules. And this is the agenda for this particular topic. So I'm going to talk on what is module first. And following that, I will explain like what is single module Angular app and multi-module Angular app. And following that, how we can make our Angular app load faster, even in like spotty connections with the help of lazy loading. And following that, we will decide the strategies. What are the different strategies we have for loading the Angular modules? So that's what we have. I have 4 strategies here. So there are like n number of strategies available. You can pick whichever you want according to your requirements. But here I am going to discuss about 4 strategies that I found on, while learning about preloading strategies on internet. Okay, and at the end I will take questions from you, and I will answer with my experience on preloading strategies. Okay. So I'm Udhay. I'm a developer working on awesome stuff in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a speaker, and I also host Angular Meetup group. I host I have 2 Meetup groups. One is based on Raleigh and neighborhood area, and the other one is online Meetup, where I cover developers from across the world. Okay, and I also have a blog. I write like posts on Angular, React sometimes. So I will share my blog link at the end of this event. And you can catch me at the handle at Ask Udhay on Twitter, GitHub, YouTube, as well as on LinkedIn. Okay. So coming to single module Angular app. So when you create an Angular app, you should have seen it will have the module called app.module.ts, right? So the main module. So that is the only module which we have in our Angular app as soon as you create it. And that Angular app can contain, that Angular module can contain components, pipes, directives, and even it can have some other custom classes as well. So we have just one module there, and that controls the entire app, right? So this will be a great option. It will suit well for a small application. Like if your application is going to have like 3 to 4 pages, like single module is a best, best case in that there. So you can just put all your 5 pages over there in just one module and build it and deploy it into the server. It's going to work great, and it's not going to create any lagging or while loading the pages, or it's not going to create any other issues related to network as well, because you are going to have just 5 pages there, right? So when you have like multiple pages, right? Say for example, I'm going to create a e-commerce site, and that e-commerce site is going to have something like different modules, login module, products module, shopping cart module, payments module, and orders module, right? So I cannot put all these pages as a single module. So I need to split that into multiple modules. So that's why this multi-module Angular app comes into picture. So we create multiple modules, and these multiple modules are integrated together, and all these modules will be controlled by our app module, which is a root module here, right? In the previous case, the single module Angular app, like app module was the only module which controls the entire app. But in the case of multi-modular Angular app, the root module or the app module is going to control all the other modules. So each module, say for example, the product module is going to have a couple of components within that to paint something on the product page, or something like if you want to display more details about the product, again, create another product page and put it under products module, right? So this is how we can split our modules here, and all these modules can be controlled by a single module called root module or app module. But what is the problem with this approach is when you load your app from the browser, all these modules are going to be loaded along with the root module, right? So say, for example, this entire bundle is going to be something like 500 KB in size. So that 500 KB data is going to be downloaded as soon as your user hit your URL, and that is going to take a couple of moments or a couple of seconds to load based on the internet connection of the user, right? So instead of putting all these modules together like this, so we can take a different approach called lazy loading. I'm going to explain that later. So let me repeat why we are going for lazy loading again. Here we have all these modules put under a single module, tied together single module called app module, and this entire bundle will be loaded as soon as you access user access the website, right, or app. So this is going to be downloaded as a single piece, and that's going to take like couple of moments or couple of minutes. Sometimes it depends on the internet connection again, right? So we can take a different approach here. So I'm going to go with lazy loading here. Okay. So what lazy loading basically going to do is, so this picture will give you more insights on what lazy loading is all about. So say suppose I'm going to create a app called someonlinestore.com, right? We don't have any such website. So this is just an imaginary website. I just put it here for our sake of conversation. So this someonlinestore.com is going to be my web app. And this web app is going to have a couple of modules. So you can see totally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modules here. The root module is the app module, and home, products, cart, payment, orders. So these are the sub-modules or the feature modules we can call. So these are the feature modules I created on top of my root module or app module. So what exactly lazy loading does here is, when my user access someonlinestore.com/products, it's going to load products module. So only when the route path is visited, like /products is visited, it's going to load the products module. Until then, it is not going to download or load products module there, right? So only the app module will be downloaded as soon as you hit someonlinestore.com. And as soon as you move from one route path to another, the respective feature module is going to be downloaded. Say suppose your user is going to access someonlinestore.com/billing, it's going to download payments module, right? So only when the particular route path is visited, it's going to download the respective module. So this is actually the good approach compared to the previous one. Instead of downloading all the modules together as a single piece, so we are splitting that downloading part based on the route visited by user. So this is a great approach. But again, this has some pitfalls. Say, for example, your orders module is again going to be 500 KB in size, right? And your user click on orders hyperlink from your page, and it fires an event to download orders feature module. But since it is going to be 500 KB in size, it is again going to take a couple of seconds or couple of minutes based on internet connection to download it, right? So user has to wait till that orders module is downloaded. Some user gets frustrated, and if they don't see a quick response on the page, they just close the page or they just report it. Okay, it depends upon how the user feels about the lagging of web page loading, right? So similarly, if your products module is going to be like 2 MB in size, say for example, like 2 megabytes in size, and when your user clicks on products link from your web page, it's going to fire an event to download products module, right? Since it is going to be 2 MB in size again, it's going to take a couple seconds to download it. So we have, even though this approach is good, this lazy loading approach is good, we have some pitfalls here, right? So how we are going to fix it? So that's what we are going to see now. And before that, how to create lazy loading, how to configure lazy loading in Angular. So you don't have to write everything from scratch. Angular provides a couple of commands to do that, right? So whenever, as I already told you, some online store is my app name. So I create a new project called some online store with option -- routing. Whenever I add this -- routing, what exactly happens is it adds app routing module.ts, right? And it also add a couple of configuration for us. And this configuration comes with like path and the respective lazy loaded modules. Okay. And let me quickly check if I have any comments from users, just to make sure I don't have any issue with my streaming. Okay. So there are no issues. Cool. So coming back. So to create feature module and also to add the path to my feature module, we have to use this command. So ng-generate module, your module name. In this case, the module name is a payment, and I also need to provide the route. So for which route this module needs to be downloaded. So that's what I configure here. For billing module, for billing route path, I want to load payments module. And I want to create this payment module under app.module, right? So your feature module can have another feature module. So it depends upon your requirements again. But in this case, I'm going to put this payment module right under the app.module with the path as billing. So let me go back to my code and show you how it got created. Say, for example, about is my route path, and about module is my module. The configuration is going to be something like this. So when about path is visited, it's going to download about module. Okay, simple as that. So in this case, when user visits a billing path, it's going to download payments module. Simple, right? So this is how it's going to look like. So the configuration is for billing, it's going to download payments module. And it's your job now to put payments component within payments module, right? Go ahead and create different components under payment module, and put your HTML, TypeScript, pipe, whatever you want under payments module. And this payments module will be downloaded only when user visits /billing of your SPA page, right? SPA app, not just page. So the drawback we already discussed, right? So the only drawback we have with this lazy loading is when the particular route path is visited, it's going to fire an event to download the respective module. If the module size is huge, user needs to wait. Even though you put some like a loading GIF or a spinning image over there, as soon as user sees a spinning image there, he's going to get frustrated, right? So he wants to get the page loaded as fast as possible. So that's what our goal as well, right? So how we can fix that? How we can load this module ahead of user clicks the billing link or products link? How we can load this modules even before user tries to click on these links, right? Basically, how we can preload that. So that's what we are going to see from now on. And we have 4 strategies here, as I already told you. So preloading all, preloading selective, preloading network-based, and preloading quick link. Okay. And before that, I just want to show you the quick demo of the app which I have here. I created this app, and it's currently running on my machine. The example which I took for today's discussion is a Pokemon app. And this app was created using Angular navbar schematic. So that's why you see the nice navbar here. I didn't write a single line of code for this navbar. Angular schematic itself created it for me. Okay, and this Pokemon is a module here. As soon as I click on this Pokemon link, it's going to load the list of Pokemons for me. If I want to see the specific Pokemon stats, I just need to click on the Pokemon. Okay, so that will give me the stats, like what this Pokemon is all about in terms of stats. Okay, if I want to view all Pokemons, just click on this. You can see the route is /Pokemon here. Okay, and when I click on this individual Pokemon here, it's going to take me to the /Pokemon/ the respective Pokemon ID, basically, right? And I also have another page here called About. This is just about my app, okay, what this app is all about. So if you ask me, I have a couple of modules here. Hope you are able to see my screen. If you have any issues, let me know in comments, okay? I'll just quickly go through the comments once again, just to make sure we don't have any issues, okay? Okay, so coming back to the code, I have 4 modules, four modules here, basically. And including app module, I have 5 modules, right? So app.module.ts is my root module, the main module, which is going to control the other modules. And apart from this app module, I have 4 modules. They are called feature modules. The first feature module I have is home module, which is for painting something on my home page. This nice Pokemon image, this header H1, and a simple anchor, hyperlink in the bottom. Okay, so I have that stuff in the home page, home module. And following that, I have a Pokemon module. This Pokemon module is all about this Pokemon page, basically. Okay, and also I have another module called Pokemon Service. Pokemon Stats. This Pokemon Stats is going to have something about Pokemon stats. Whatever page you are seeing here, I'm having that information within Pokemon Stats. And the last module which I have here is About module. And this About module is going to have something about my app, basically. Okay, I have basically 5 modules here: home module, Pokemon module, and Pokemon stats module, app, about module, and root module. Okay, so that's all. So this is what my demo app is all about. Coming back to our slides. Okay, let's go over with the first strategy what we have here, which is a preloading strategy for all. As the name says, it's going to download all modules irrespective of the lazy loading configuration what we did here. Even if user is not going to visit billing route path or not, this preloading all configuration is going to download all the modules as soon as user visits your website or a single page app. Okay, so preloading all modules is actually a good idea when your modules are in smaller chunks, smaller size. Say suppose all your module, inclusive of all modules, if your app size is going to be like 100 KB or 200 KB, fine. It will load quickly, and it's not going to create any mess on loading the pages, right? But if your modules are going to be in huge size, this strategy is not good at all, right? Preloading all the modules ahead of visiting the individual route path by user is not a good idea if your modules are in bigger size or huge size, right? But if just in case, if you want to configure for your application, how to do that? It's very simple. All you need to do is go to app.route.module.ts, and in the route module.for route, and wherever you put this routes configuration, just add preloading strategy as preload all modules. Okay, that's it. When you add this piece of code, all modules are going to be loaded, irrespective of user visits, the individual path. Okay, but before doing that, I just want to show you the quick demo of how this path works, right? So let me remove that piece of code for preloading all, because I just want to show you how lazy loading lazy loading works first by visiting the individual paths. Okay, let me enable a console for this app, and I'm going to visit this page and go to Networks tab. And in Networks tab, you can see the image and the respective JavaScript files got loaded first. And let me clear this, because I'm going to visit the different modules here. And I want to show whether those modules are loaded as soon as I visit the individual route path. Okay. Now I'm going to visit Pokemon, right? So now I'm going to visit this link /Pokemon. So when I click on the /Pokemon, you can see the Pokemon page gets loaded here. But in the Networks tab, if you see here, the Pokemon -module.js got loaded. So this is how lazy loading works. So when you visit the individual path, the respective module got loaded, right? So let me clear this logs again, and I'm going to click on this individual Pokemon here. I got the stats here, and just go back to the Networks tab and see. Now the Pokemon stats module got loaded. Hope you are able to see now. You can see Pokemon stats module loaded as soon as I visit /Pokemon/1. Similarly, when I click on About link, you can see About module got loaded. So this is how lazy loading works, right? As soon as I click on the individual link, the respective modules are loaded. But if you can ask me a question now. So what happens if I click on this about link again? Will that load the About module again? No, it's not going to load that, because the About module was already loaded. So there is no point in go and fetch the About module again, right? So that's how the Angular module works. It just downloads a module and have it in the browser, and it uses it as soon as the respective route path is visited. Okay, so this is a plain lazy loading module, which we, lazy loading strategy, what we discussed before. But now I'm going to enable a preloading strategy for this app. And the preloading strategy, what I'm going to follow here is preload all. Okay, I want to preload all modules here. The preloading strategy, what I followed here is preload all modules. So I just want to load all modules irrespective of whether user visits the respective route path. Okay, so let me open a new private browser again, and open the console. Go to Network tab, and just keep watching this Network tab. And I'm going to access the app localhost :4200. And you can see all the modules got loaded because of the configuration what we did. So it loaded Pokemon -module, Pokemon -stats -module, and About module. Okay, it preloaded all the modules, even though it is not needed. Even though I'm not going to visit this /Pokemon now, but it downloaded that, because we configured it such a way that I want to preload all the modules even before user visits the route path. Okay, so this is the first strategy we have for our discussion today, which is preloading strategy all. Okay, so if you have any question, just post it on YouTube comments. Okay. Yes, Vivek, I will answer your questions at the end of this event. End of this talk. Okay, this is the strategy what we have, the strategy 1. So moving on to the next strategy. Okay, before moving on to the next strategy, do you see any drawback of using this strategy? Can you put that in the comments? So is this a good practice to load all modules even before it is needed? Is this a good practice? Okay, you can just say yes or no. If you just want to justify that, if you say yes, you can do that in comments. Okay, yeah, so we got a couple of answers from audience. Yes, it defeats the purpose of lazy loading. That's true. Yeah, but in spite of that, it will be very helpful when your modules are very small in size, right? Say suppose if user is having a spotty connection, internet connection, right? So it is the best practice to download all the modules even before user is going to visit those individual route paths, provided all your modules are smaller in chunks, right? Even if user is going to have a spotty connection, these pages are going to be loaded, and user is not going to get affected because of the intermittent internet connection, right? That is one advantage we have here. But again, we have some trade-offs here. We need to download all the modules ahead. Okay, so that's what we have for preloading strategy all. Let's move on to the next strategy, which is a selective strategy, or we can even call it as a opt-in strategy. So what this strategy is all about is you choose which module you want to preload. And in that case, you just want to let know Angular that please override a lazy loading strategy here and just download the module that is needed even before a user visits those route paths. Okay, you can mention that in the route configuration, like please download this module ahead as soon as you load the app, right? So we can do that configuration in our routes. We just need to add something like data colon preload colon true. We need to provide the data object, and this data JSON object takes a JSON parameter called preload. And this preload can be either true or false. If you provide the value as true, it's going to preload that module irrespective of lazy loading strategy. If you provide this preload value as false, it is not going to load that module. It's not going to preload that module, but this module will be loaded as soon as user visits that path. So in this case, we have two paths. One is home, the other one is about. This home module will be loaded as soon as the single page application is accessed, even before that /home is visited. But this about module is not going to be preloaded. It will be loaded only when user visits /about. Okay, so this is the configuration we need to add. But this configuration doesn't come with it doesn't come as a pre-configured one in Angular, because we need to add a couple of piece of code here to just let know Angular that, okay, take my custom strategy and work on the preloading of modules. So we need to create a custom strategy here. And the custom strategy, what I have here is selective preload strategy. You name it however you want. You can name it like opt-in preload strategy or selective strategy, whatever. And you need to write a piece of code to let know Angular like preload this particular module, right? So all you need to do is you need to implement an interface called preload strategy. Preload strategy is an interface in Angular that comes with a function called preload. And you need to override this preload method. Actually, this preload method is getting called as soon as you visit the respective routes in lazy loading strategy, right, internally. So we are going to override that preload method here to preload the modules according to our configurations, what we did here. Okay, so how we need to put this piece of code is create a class, you can create a service class, and make sure that service class implements preloading strategy interface, and you need to override the method called preload, and this preload methods is going to return observable basically. Okay, and from route data, we need to make sure whether this module needs to be preloaded or not. Okay, so for each route configuration, what we have here, this preload method will be called. Okay, and it checks whether that route data is true or false. If it is true, it is going to preload that. If it is false, it is not going to preload that. It is going to return empty observable. Okay, so this piece of code we need to put it in our selective preloading strategy class, and this is going to take care of our selective preloading strategy. Okay, so since we are running out of time, I'm not going to do the code changes. Rather, I'm just going to rather, I'm going to pull the code what I already have in my Git repository. I created a couple of branches here. So I created 4 branches. Each branch has the different code for the respective preloading strategy. So the next strategy what we have here is preloading strategy, right? So let me just check out that code for preloading strategy. And this is what that code here. Okay. So for what I'm planning to do here is I want to preload this home module, and also I want to preload a Pokemon module, and I don't want to preload about module, and also I don't want to preload Pokemon / the respective Pokemon ID module, right? I mean the Pokemon stats module. So that's how I configured it here. Okay, so I just want to preload 2 modules. One is home module, the other one is Pokemon module. Okay, and the preloading strategy what I'm going to follow here is selective preloading strategy, and the selective preloading strategy is having the piece of code for preload method here, and this is going to take the value of data object from route, and it's going to check whether that the preload value is true or false. If it is true, it is going to load this module. If it is not true, that is false, it's going to load. It's not going to preload. That's why we return empty observable from here. Okay, so let me repeat again. I want to preload home module and Pokemon module. Okay, so let me go back to my private browser. Let me open a new session so that it will not have any modules that was already loaded in my previous runs. Okay, so just open the network tab, and we are checking for selective preloading strategy here. We should see home module got loaded. Okay, home module will get loaded by default because it is the first bootstrap module, I would say. Okay, that's why you won't see it here. It is loaded as part of this main.ts itself. Main.js itself. But along with that, you will see another module got loaded, which is Pokemon.module, right? Because I configured it such a way that I want to load a Pokemon module. I want to preload the Pokemon module. That's why you see the Pokemon module got loaded here. But you don't see the other 2 modules like about module and Pokemon stat modules not loaded because I configured it such a way that I don't want to preload those 2. Okay, all set. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to visit Pokemon page. So let me clear the network logs before that. I'm accessing Pokemon link here, which should lazy load the Pokemon module based on our code, but it will not do that because the Pokemon module was already preloaded. So that's why it will not load it again. But If I click on this specific Pokemon here, it's going to load Pokemon stats module anyway, that you can see here, right? It loaded Pokemon stats module. And similarly, when I visit this about page, you can see the about module also got loaded. Okay, all set. The lazy loading works perfectly for the other modules that are not preloaded. So we haven't screwed up anything for lazy loading in that case, right? So if you have any question on selective preloading strategy, just put it on YouTube comments. I will come back and share my answers. Okay. So what do you feel? Will the strategy be effective when we compare with a preloading strategy all? And where exactly we can put this in place? Just put that in the comments. I will just read it over later. Okay. So I'll repeat the question again. Where exactly we can use this selective preloading strategy? So what would be the business use case? Okay, just put it in the comments. I'll just read it over later. And also, if you have any question or any doubts, put it in the comment section. I will help you out. Okay. So coming back to the next strategy, yeah. Before going to the next strategy, where exactly we can use this strategy is, say for example, you want to load your products module before. I mean, since I am having a e-commerce website, I know like my customers will visit a products page for sure. As soon as they log in and as soon as they access something on the dashboard, they will visit products page for sure, right? So why don't I preload that products module even before they visit that, so that they will not face or they will not feel any slowness in loading the page, right? So in that case, we can use preloading strategy like selective strategy. So you select the particular modules that you feel like your users will visit for sure, and put it. Set the preload configuration as true for those. Okay, and those modules will be preloaded when the app is loaded for first time. Okay, and coming to the third strategy, which is network connection based. So preloading the modules, like preloading the selective, preloading all modules, or preloading the selective modules are a good idea, right? But we also need to check whether the user is having good network connection, first of all. So we need to check whether user is having a 4G connection or 2G connection, internet connection. Based on that, we need to preload the modules, right? So like selective module, for example, will not work well if the user is having a 2G connection, right? So this will make a more burden for your app to get loaded for first time itself, because your app needs to load app module as well as your products module. And that's going to take more time to paint something on the page if the user's network connection is 2G, for example. So that's why we have a network connection based strategy here. And this is going to check what the network connection is, first of all. And based on that, preload the modules, right? And again, this is not a predefined one or the predefined configuration that comes in Angular. We need to write a piece of code to decide, to check the network connection of users. And based on that, we need to decide whether to preload or not. So we need to write that piece of code. So I will go to that in the next slide. So before that, the strategy what we are going to follow is network preload strategy. This is a custom preload strategy what I have written, right? You can name it however you want. Like if you keep it as like a spotty connection preload strategy, you can just put it here and make sure you create a service class for that, and you add that piece of code here. Okay. Okay, I actually put it in the wrong place, I guess. Okay, I don't have that piece of code on my slide, but I can show that on my VS Code. Okay, so let me check out network-based preload strategic code, and this is how my code looks like. So again, I'm implementing a preloading strategy interface here. And this interface is going to have a method called preload. And this preload method is going to check what my internet connection is, first of all. And based on that, it's going to either load or it will not load the modules, the respective modules. Okay. But before that, how I can check my user's internet connection? Okay. So luckily, we have an API for that. I mean, we have a web API for that. And that web API is supported in all modern browsers. And the API name is navigator.connection. So, I mean, the API name is navigator. And the connection will get us the object to just check the user's network type, as well as whether the user enabled the save data mode, all those stuffs. Okay. And this navigator.connection will get me the object. And using that object, I'm going to get the user's effective type. Okay, so let me do that from my console as well. Okay, so just go to console and just type navigator dot. It is navigator dot connection. Okay, so navigator dot connection is an object basically. Okay, so using that, I'm going to get the effective type, which is nothing but my network type, which is 4G. So even though I'm connected to Wi-Fi network here, it says 4G, right? Say suppose I'm going to change, mimic this network type to something like slow 3G. So slow 3G is obviously is going to be 2G, I believe. So go back here, and it says 2G. Hope you are able to see my screen. Okay. It says 2G here. Okay, because I mimicked 2G network speed here. Okay, in networks. So let me put it back as online, which is my actual network type. Okay, so using this effective type, I'm going to check whether to preload this module or not. So I don't want to preload the modules if the network connection is 2G or 3G. Okay. If the network connection is 2G or 3G, I don't want to preload the modules. Okay, that's what I am doing here. If the network to avoid array contains the effective type as 2G or 3G, it's going to return false. Otherwise, it is going to return true. And based on this value from this method return, I'm going to load this module. If it is going to be false, I'm not going to load the module. Okay. So let me mimic that from my browser. Let me open a new session. Localhost 4200. And go to Networks tab. Okay, everything got loaded. So let me reload this once again. You can see all modules got loaded because my network type is 4G. So that's why you can see Pokemon, Pokemon stats, and about module. All these three modules got loaded. Like, see, about module got loaded, Pokemon module got loaded, and even Pokemon stats module also got loaded, right? Okay, so now I'm going to mimic a different internet connection here. Let me change it to fast 3G, which is actually 3G, right? Let me clear this network lock. Let me reload this. And you can see, since it is 3G network, I mean, I'm mimicking 3G network, you can see it is loading very slowly. Okay, that's going to take a couple of seconds, but that's fine. We'll see the demo once it gets loaded. Okay, cool. Since it is loading based on 3G connection, we were seeing that lagging on loading the pages. And if you see here, no modules got loaded here except home module, right? Because my connection is 3G, I don't want to preload the other modules. But if I click on Pokemon module now, Pokemon link now, this will behave in a lazy loading strategy now. You can see Pokemon module got loaded because I visited Pokemon route path, right? And even the images are loading slowly because we are running it on 3G internet speed. Okay, let me clear this out and let me click on about page, and now you should see the about module got loaded. Okay, this is behaving in the lazy loading strategy way. Okay, so that's it. So we are done with the network strategy as well. So do you have any question on network-based preloading strategy? If so, just put it on YouTube comments. Okay, so where exactly we can use this is, if your app is going to be loaded on loaded from mobile, you need to make sure user is having 4G connection in order to preload the modules. If user is not having 4G connection, internet connection, you don't need to preload all the modules. Just let it load in the lazy loaded way. Okay, so that's all about network-based preloading strategy. Coming to the last one, which is quick link strategy, and I'm going to use a third-party module called Quick Links here, which is created by NgRx. He's a Angular expert working for Google, and he's a Google developer expert again. He has created this module, and it's available in NPM as well. And how this module works is, it just goes through the viewport of your page and checks what are the router links are there. And for those router links, it will just fetch all the respective modules, right? Because user may visit those links, so you need to preload all those modules, right? So this will work only when you have router links in your page, not the href. Okay, you need to have router links in your page, and when user visit that page, whatever router links available for all those modules associated with those router links will be preloaded. Okay, so in our case, so let me pull the code for this one. So coding, the configuration is very simple for this one. All we need to do is we need to install the package, the quick link package, what I showed from GitHub, and you need to import that module. You need to import that module in your app module, the root module actually. And also you need to put this quick link strategy as your preloading strategy in your route configuration. Okay, so this will take care of preloading all the modules associated with our router links. Okay, if I go back to my home page, the home module, whatever I showed before, I have a simple module here. Sorry, here it is. Okay, I have a simple page here. I have 3 router links here. One for home, the second one is for /Pokemon, the third one is for /about. So for /Pokemon, it is obviously going to, load Pokemon module. For /about, it is going to load about module, right? As soon as I visit my home page, these 2 modules will get preloaded as well, because I'm going to follow quick link strategy, right? So what I do, I will start from a new session again. So localhost 4200 network. Let me clear this out and reload this page once again. You can see it loaded. Okay, since it is in the cache already. I just want to do it from the beginning again. Okay, so let me open the networks tab. From now, here, I'm going to access this page. Okay. Okay. I think even though I loaded this, I mean, I changed this code. I checked out the new code, but I guess it is not pulled and it's not built properly. So what I do, I will just do ng serve once again, because I'm not seeing the expected result here. So what I do, I am going to do ng serve once again, so that it will pull the quick strategy module and it will bundle it with our app module, right? Because it was loaded as and when the app was running. So that's why it was creating that problem. Okay, so okay, it's time to access our app. So go to networks and access localhost 4200, and now you can see the expected result. Okay, as I already told you, I have 3 router links here: //Pokemon/about. Since I follow quick link strategy, it preloaded Pokemon module and about module, because I know that user is going to visit these 2 links for sure, at least by now, or in a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds, right? So that's why we are preloading these 2 modules, like Pokemon module and about module, right? So when I click on this about now, it's not going to load that about module again, because it was preloaded already, right? So this is the 4th strategy what I followed here. Hope you got some idea on preloading strategy. If you have any question, just put it on YouTube comments. I will read it over and answer your questions. And here are the links for today's session. Like, you can access my code from here. And before that, I need to share my presentation, right? So I just put this presentation in YouTube comments. Just access it from there, and you can find the code from my GitHub. And I also host this app in Firebase, and you can access this app right from here. Okay, and I was not sure like which preloading strategy I pushed to this app. I think it was preloading all, right? So just access this app from the link which I posted in YouTube comments. So this piece of code is running on Firebase. Okay, and also you can touch base with me on Twitter at Ask Udhay if you have any question on preloading strategy, or if you want to talk about something on Angular in our future meetup events, you can just touch base with me there. So you are very welcome to talk about something on Angular in our events. Okay, and if you want to check my previous talks, you can go to my website askudhay.com. And I need to tell something about this website. And I created this using Gatsby. And Sam was my inspiration. So he also created his website using Gatsby. He shared his thoughts on how Gatsby works and how to do the pre-configurations, all those stuff in his blog. I just read over that, and I created this website. Okay, and you can check my talks here. And this is again a single-page application, but it runs on React.js, not Angular. Okay, and if just in case if you want to go back to my February event, just check here. You can see the event picture and also the important links like Meetup event link, slides I used, and a demo what we used, or the app creator, and the code also you can find from this link. Okay, so that's it. So you can even reach out me from my blog, askudhay.com, from the contacts page. Okay, that's all from my end, and thank you so much for sticking with us. Okay, now it's a question and answer session. Okay, let me go back to StreamYard. Okay, let me remove my screen. Okay. Yeah. Let me go through the questions one by one. Okay, so this is a question from Vivek. Does the lazy loaded modules get cached? Yeah, yes, Vivek, it gets cached, provided. I mean, gets cached in the sense when user visits your page next time, when he opens the browser, if he visits the same page again in future, it's not going to pick from the cache. Rather, Angular is going to pull it from the server, right? So that is one thing. But when this will be cached and used is when user is going to be on the same session, and if he is going to revisit the pages one again and again, it's not going to pick the module from server. Rather, it will pick it from the cache. So that's how the caching works. But the module will not be cached when as soon as the user close the browser or logs out or however you want to handle that. Okay. Hope I answered your question. Okay, and I think you added this answer for preloading all strategy, right? Yes, preloading all modules is actually defeating the purpose of lazy loading, right? But still, we can use preloading all in cases where you want to load all the modules, like if you have a business case where you need to load all the modules. Also, if your modules are like feature modules are like smaller in chunks. Okay. And this is the answer from Ganapati Hari. Yes, I think it's for preloading all again. Okay, this is a question from Alex. Is there a way to load initial module, show for user, and then cache all the rest, not to take user's time when any module referenced? I think, Alex, we did that already. We preloaded modules based on network or based on selective modules, right? Even you can preload your other feature modules based on user action. Suppose if your user is mouse hovering on a particular hyperlink that has link for /products, that gives some sense like user is going to click on products page. So when user mouse over on the products link, you can fire an event to download the products module even before user clicks on the products link. Okay, I think you can do that. Do it that way. Hope I answer your question. Okay, and yeah, thank you, Vic. Thanks for the question. And any more questions, participants? Okay. Hope you had a wonderful evening today. I add Sam also to the stream to just say goodbye. Thank you so much, Sam, for your time. And
yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, and thanks, participants,
thanks,
for joining.
Have a good rest of your night.
Yeah. Yeah, have a great rest of the day. And we will share you the slides and other stuffs on my Twitter page, or even you can check it on my website, askudhay.com. And thanks once again for joining. Have a great rest of the day.